Hello,
All
everyone,
right.
and welcome to the Excessively Average Gamers podcast, In Depth with Indies. We have the studio here, Axon Genesis, and they are the creators of Sidetrek, which is a racing game. I'm Byron Hopkins, and I am your co-host. Then we have Spencer here,
Yeah.
and he is the other half of the co-host. And then why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and your studio?
Yeah, so my name is Stephen Walker, and I'm the creator behind Axon Genesis. And I've been making this game called Sidetrek, which is a futuristic anti-gravity racing game. So I'm midway through development right now and looking to release it maybe summer next year. And yeah, super grateful for you guys to invite me on your show to talk about it.
Yeah, glad to have you here.
Yeah, we're super happy to have you here, man. Why don't we go ahead and have you introduce your game and what it's about?
All right. So Sidetrek has been really a process of evolution. Fairly new to the whole gaming industry, but I've been a developer for a really long time. And about a year and a half ago, I thought, well, maybe I should try something new, and I wanted to create a product that was all my own. And I had been using Unity already for several years and had a lot of experience doing graphics and music production. And I thought, well, maybe I'll make a video game. So I initially had these wild ideas I'd be able to do something in a few months, and I had this really clear idea that I would make basically like an interactive music video. But once I made a prototype, it was really boring, and I realized if I want to make something interactive, it needs to be more like a game. So I went deep into learning about gaming, and just as this has evolved, Sidetrek has born into a full-on game with a pretty massive scope. But essentially, you're a pilot of a spacecraft, and you're going through these kind of alien futuristic worlds, collecting shapes. And each of the shapes represent a part of a puzzle that is needed to unlock a portal to the most ancient civilization in the galaxy that can solve this problem that's plaguing the universe, which is this dark energy which is invading. So that's sort of the premise of the game. And but essentially what the players do is pilot the ship around, avoid obstacles, look for these hidden items, and it's really about exploration. It's unlike other racing games where you just have a track and you go forward and around or from point A to point B. This is like a maze of different pathways that you can explore, and there's just continually new stuff to discover.
That sounds awesome. I like the backstory you have there. Can you go into that anymore, or is this spoiler alert?
Oh, yeah, you mean the story of the game itself?
Yeah, with the ancient civilization and everything like that.
Right. Yeah, that's also a really interesting. It's been a really interesting process for me because initially I had no story idea for the game. It was just I had a concept of the visuals I wanted and sort of the aesthetics of it, um, and I'd come up with the name Sidetrek even before I had the story. And the whole idea was, the psi aspect of it is you know, I wanted it to be psychedelic and be really trippy, and it's scored to psytrance music. So I wanted it to have that element in it. And then the Trek part of it, of course, is like, like a Star Trek or, something of that in that vein. So, but when I had created a prototype, I realized it's really lacking substance in terms of like what's the player's objectives, what's driving them, what's the motivating force. And so I kind of went back to the drawing board, and for like a month all I did was write story. And I used like the hero's journey map and all these different type of archetype ideas, and I wrote this massive story that was way more than I could do. I mean, a AAA studio would have to do it. Like there's be voice actors and stuff. I even got into writing scripts and then realized, wait, I can't do all this on my own. So I've been dialing it back, and now it's a process of how much of the story can I include. And yeah, I don't know how much I don't know how I can do this without spoiling too much, but essentially the premise is it starts off that you are your home world is being invaded, It's the part of your galaxy's already been destroyed by this dark force that's just coming in and just destroying everything, and nobody seems to be able to stop it. People can keep it at bay for short periods of time, but nothing is able to stop it. And the only thing that remains to do is to find the most ancient civilization that is only known by legend, the Primori. And the Primori are the only ones that have the ability to stop it, but they've disappeared, and the only thing they've left behind is a codex. And this codex consists of 12 shapes. They're geometric shapes. Each of these go up in order of magnitude, starting with the most primitive of the 3D plane, going into a hexahedron, into a tetrahedron, icosahedron, so using all these different sacred geometry aspects. And the idea is that only those who are worthy are going to be able to find the pieces to complete the codex. And once the codex is complete, it will open that portal, that gateway to the Primori, who will then aid in restoring balance to the universe, or to your part of the galaxy. So there's actually a whole lot more to this, but I don't know how much you guys want to know at this point. But for the sake of the game, that is essentially it. And I would love for this to be a huge success, and for me to tell more of the story in the sequel. I mean, I think it could even be made into a movie eventually if that were a possibility. But I don't want to get ahead of myself.
That sounds awesome.
All right. Yeah. So how do you think your history working in this sort of area, like with graphic design and animation and stuff, how do you think all that's really helped you out in making this game?
That's a great question. And granted, this is my first game of this type and scale. I've been working in and around the industry and all the different facets of it for about 2 decades. I was actually really fortunate in that I was able to skip going right. I didn't go to college. I went right from high school, into working into related industry. Like one of my first jobs was working tech support for a 3D animation software company, and it had been my dream to be an animator all my life. And so when I got the opportunity to work with 3D animation, I realized I had a much greater aptitude for the computer aspects of it. And so just over the years, I've been continually learning and applying myself. And I worked in the visual effects industry as a 3D animator, compositor, post-production guy for about 10 years, on and off. And during that time, I also had a software company, Walker Effects, which was, I built a bunch of plugins for After Effects. They're all C++ graphics plugins that were built specifically for doing visual effects work. And I use those heavily within all my own production stuff. I eventually sold that company, and I got burnt out on the film industry, and I thought, well, what's next? And I got into doing database-driven web apps and stuff like that. I did a lot of website designs, a lot of design work, a lot of coding, and then I was reached out to by a boss I used to work with, and he was starting a new company, and said, "Hey, well, how do you feel about learning some Cocoa programming for iOS? And then how do you feel about learning Unity?" And so I got involved with that company, and over the course of a few years, we built. I was basically the sole developer for. We did like a dozen or so apps and built a whole publishing system in Unity for interactive children's books. Oh. So I was working with a designer. Sometimes we had multiple designers. So I basically was building tools and workflows that the designers then would use to create the books. And it was like 2.5D, where you bring in art and it creates like a multi-planing effect. So by the time that job eventually ended, and I wanted to do my own thing, and so I thought I would make some tools for Unity. And I spent about 1.5 years building a really sophisticated animation system for Unity. And I was basically trying to create After Effects style timeline within Unity. And I got about 75% done with it, and just was completely dismayed when Unity came out with their own timeline system. And I just felt like the amount of work to finish it and running a software company, it just felt like the odds were against me, and I felt just disheartened. I thought, what am I going to do from here? I have all these tools. And that's when I came up with the idea for Sidetrack. I thought, well, if I build a game, no one can take that away from me. There might be similar games, but no one's game is going to be mine. And the animation software stuff, I still have, there's still a special place for that in my heart, and it actually is the foundation of my game. But it's not yet released. It's all proprietary at this point. So
Nice.
yeah.
Let's. I want to key in a little bit on when you were talking about you went straight from high school into kind of the industry. How did that come
Sure.
about?
You know, I look back at my past and I feel just very grateful and fortunate because at each step there were sort of doorways or entry points. I worked really hard at it for every opportunity, but the first opportunity was when I was in high school. My sister, she ended up getting a job in customer service for this animation software company, and I had never heard of them at the time. Electric Image Animation System. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that, but back in the 90s, they were like the animation system on the Macintosh, which at the time there was basically no other competitors. It was super expensive. It was like $7,500 for a license, and it was being used in broadcast graphics. And John Knoll even used it in some of his work up at ILM. So it was a really exciting place to work for. But she told them about me. She's like, "Hey, you guys, my brother, he's like, getting out of high school, but he's really talented or got interest in this stuff." And so they gave me an internship, and that ultimately turned into doing tech support for them. I just was working there a lot. And just to answer your question, to back up a little bit, I wanted to go to animation school. I wanted to become a traditional animator. And so I had worked up, submitted a portfolio to CalArts, and it was basically my only plan. I had no plan B. I wanted to go to CalArts, and that was it. And when I didn't get accepted, I just was reaching for different options, and I thought, well, why don't I just do some internships? And that I worked at two different places. Another was a animation coloring house. They did post coloring for cartoons, but that one didn't really pan out. The Electric Image job was the one that provided me technical support position, and then after a couple of years of that, I left that and got into more.
Uh-oh. Looks like we may have lost him there. Uh-oh.
Hopefully, it's just a blip in the road in the connection.
Let's see if we can get him back. I'll throw up the demo while we're waiting on him.
All right. Sorry about that, guys.
All right,
Not sure what.
we lost him there for a second, but we are back now. Sorry for
Yeah.
that little hiccup. And we will go ahead
To the
and
game
pick
at
up.
least.
Yeah, you'll get to see the nice game preview there. All right,
Awesome.
so we'll go ahead and move on a little bit. So what was it that made you want to get into developing you started out as you wanted to be an animator. How did that parlay then into wanting to be a game developer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think ever since a early age, as soon as I got my hands on a computer, which was, I think our first computer was like 88, 89 or something, and it was just like a little Macintosh, and I remember spending a lot of time just messing around with that, drawing like pixel art and stuff. And then mid 90s, my mom got me this software that was called Animator Pro, and it ran through DOS, and was basically this really low res like 2D animation system at the time. And so I did a lot of stuff with that, just playing around with animations. But it also had a scripter that was like, I think it was Pico language or something, and it was so cryptic to me. But I just felt like I wanted to learn more about it. I had dabbled in BASIC, and so I think just throughout my life I've alternated between wanting to do development work and doing graphic stuff. And so, and then that just continued, and I kept learning more stuff. I remember when I had the idea, maybe I should write After Effects plugins, and it seemed like such a crazy idea. Like I didn't think I'd be able to do it, and I first tried using this really outdated compiler, but I contacted somebody I had used to work with back at the software company, and I asked him, hey, how do I do this? And he told me basically the software I needed to get, which at the time was Code Warrior. That was like on the Mac. That was the software to have to develop, which is long gone now, been replaced by Xcode and whatnot. And just over the years, I just kept dabbling. I kept learning. I built my first website and e-commerce system in, I think it was 99 or 2000 for my Walker Effects business. Because once I had successfully created some plugins, I was giving them away free for a while, and I thought maybe I'll make this into a real business. And so I just kept leveling up each of the different things. And in visual effects, it served me greatly, because in visual effects work, there's so much problem solving to be done, and being able to code and script and write tools is very, very handy. So I did a lot of that too in that work, which I always loved that. I always loved being able to like write scripts in Maya, or Cinema 4D actually is my tool of choice now.
Nice.
Yeah.
So in fact, with Sidetrack, there's a bunch of tools I've written in Cinema 4D for building the track system. So that was a complex issue. Is like, how do you build dynamic tracks that go in every direction and connect and do stuff? And I didn't want to create a procedural modeler inside of Unity itself. So I used the scripting within Cinema 4D to do stuff and really expedite that process.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and we'll get into some of the development questions. So I'm going to go ahead and let Spencer do this segment, and then we'll move on to some of the business aspects of it after that.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. Looks like it's the boring part now. Just kidding. So, you look like you're trying to get on your website and stuff. You're trying to get a little into virtual reality, like integrate that with the game. Do you think that's really a strong part of it, or just something you're putting in because you can?
I would say both. However, it was my initial idea to do something virtual reality from the onset. And in fact, before I started Sidetrack, I was really interested in augmented reality, and I experimented with doing like interactive art pieces where it's regular art on the wall, but then you walk up to it with with the augmented reality headset, and the art would jump out and do stuff. But it was too primitive. The tracking was too wonky and jittery. So I got into virtual reality and thought maybe I'll do something there. But as I tend to do, I don't do simple ideas. Like my ideas just keep growing and growing, and so I haven't created anything yet. I haven't published anything yet, I should say, that's a VR experience. But from the very beginning with Sidetrack, I was experimenting with VR. Now, where it's at currently, it leaves a lot to be desired, because I've been focused more on gameplay mechanics and getting those things right. And I figured I already have the basics of VR working, but the controllers don't work. You basically need a gamepad right now. And then also, when you hit things, your ship goes flying all over the place, and that is not conducive for the best VR experience.
No.
Yeah.
Might have some
So
people puking.
right, but I think there's a market for it because and especially as time people get used to it. I got a game to check out. I don't know if you guys have seen it, Rush. It's on Steam, and you basically are in a flight suit and you jump down and off cliffs and stuff. And it's really well done, but it's, oh my gosh, I cannot stand it. It's too intense.
Yeah.
Oh, and it'll be the new YouTube challenge. See how long you can play Sidetrack before you barf.
Yeah. Right. So granted, there's definitely work I want to do in terms of smoothing out the camera, and like when the ship hits certain obstacles, I need to constrain it so it doesn't just fly all over the place. Or if it does, it doesn't take the player with it. So you can kind of stand off and see it like a toy being jostled around without it actually shaking your head.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so, like, will that involve like messing with the physics of the game? Or do you feel like you won't have to worry about that as much? You'll just have to worry about how the camera works.
It's more.
Oh, there I go.
That
That was my last question, I guess.
Yeah, it's basically, it comes down to the camera rig. So, and I have a really complex camera rig setup where I can actually separate it from the vehicle, and it can essentially follow with its own constraints. So the camera is its own entity that basically is programmed to follow the ship. But there's definitely rough edges that need to be smoothed out. Like, for example, if you're flying through a tunnel, you don't want to be clipping your head through the tunnel. Like that's still an issue sometimes. But I know I can dial all those things in. It's just a matter of prioritizing. And once I get to the finishing stage, I'll be really dialing that stuff in.
Yeah, as you can see, I probably could use a little camera help myself.
Yeah, I think we're about to lose you again. It's slowly creeping.
Watch out! Watch out! Do you have any like games that inspired this a lot, like Wipeout? I know that's probably one a lot of people think of when they think of anti-gravity racers. Or was it like a game?
I was really trying to avoid like the typical anti-gravity racing game, and so like what you won't see in Sidetrack is the typical racer type like gameplay. It's actually more of a game of exploration where going fast just happens to be part of the things you can do, and you are in a race against time in order to get the pieces. But I kind of started from scratch and creating my own system based on the Unity physics because I didn't want it to feel or look like anyone else's game. But there are definitely games that have inspired me, but they're not really directly related so much. But maybe like Rush, the arcade game, another game named Rush is confusing. San Francisco City Rush, there's like LA Rush, I think, but it's an arcade game. Always remember like had these green seats, and it's such a cool racing game because there's always secret passages and like things you can discover, and so that was a big part of my inspiration for this. But I also go back to like my earliest days of playing like you guys ever play that game Tunnel Runner on the Atari 2600?
You're getting a little farther back than I go, know. I was born in '90s, so
okay. Yeah, it's a simple game, but the concept's basically you're in a maze and you're trying to find this little gem type thing, and then the doorway out, and there's monsters roaming the hall. And it was actually, I think, one of the first 3D games, because they actually did like hallway things where you're going down a hallway and you turn and it makes these like kind of footstep sounds, and you can hear the monster when it's getting nearby. And so there's a monster in my game that is, I would say, largely inspired by that. It's basically this dark sphere that's roaming around, and if you bump it or if you attack it, it gets really angry and comes after you and attacks you. And that's the dark energy that is, and it also like will eat up points and stuff. So if you defeat it, that's where you get awards. And so there's like 2 objectives layered within the game.
Okay, so you may end up with some high-speed chases within your track with this thing. Oh, that actually sounds pretty fun. I like that.
Yeah, and there's some interesting things. The AI I'm still working on, but if there's times where the sphere can get knocked, like if you use your shockwave blast, it'll get knocked really far away, and then it comes back at you like supersonic speed, and so it's kind of like a bullfight. You might dodge it, you might get hit by it, and then the more you kind of provoke it, the more angry it gets.
Nice.
Yeah, so like a lot of the uniqueness you're trying to put in this game, do you think that's one of the reasons you can make this essential racer and have like multiplayer and AI players not really be as important as it would be for other ones?
Yeah, that's something I've been really torn on is the multiplayer, because ideally I would love for this to be multiplayer. Whoa. My computer went to sleep there. I would love for this to be multiplayer, but looking at the scope of the project I have already and how much there is to be done still, I just don't know it's going to fit in the first release of it. And I really, my higher priority is creating a great game that works in single player mode. But absolutely, I would love to add multiplayer to this.
Would you be able to like race against each other, or would it be more like a co-op thing where like you could both fight? Or
I've written down ideas for different play modes, and I would love for that also to be a choice the players can do. So you go into multiplayer, and you can either do co-op, or you could do like capture the flag, where there's different like base stations within each place, and then being able to choose maybe even like an arena type map where you fight with weapons. I think there's a lot of possibilities, but of course I don't want to get carried away because ideas are great, but implementation of course is going to you take some time. So
maybe future DLC.
yeah, for sure, absolutely. And that's the business aspect of this is if Sidetrack can be successful as this initial launch with a single player version, and if it compels enough people, then that would definitely fuel further development, doing multiplayer and other things to make it even more exciting.
Yeah. Do you think you'll at least have something like an online leaderboard for whoever's got the fastest times or the highest scores?
I definitely plan on doing a leaderboard, and I want to look into that. That's also on my list of things to investigate, because I've never actually implemented or integrated like with an online leaderboard thing. But I'm sure it's just a matter of figuring that out. But I'm going to first do local leaderboard for whatever players are in the game, and then of course that would be great to be able to tie it onto an online thing as well.
Nice.
So, and I've been trying all along to be forward thinking as much as possible at all that stuff. So all of the player setup stuff I've done in the game so far is all done in mind with it being multiplayer eventually. So that is, and maybe I'll be surprised once I have some time, once I've in the block of time I've designated to explore that more. Maybe it'll come together more quickly, but I'm kind of anticipating it could be kind of a big task, so I'm not going to get overly optimistic that it's going to happen fast.
Have you considered integrating other developers to assist with some of it, or is this just a project that you want to work on solo?
Good question. I have absolutely considered working with other developers. I just haven't known any personally who've jumped at it and said, hey, I want to work on this with you. And I'm actually quite happy to work on it all on my own, because I am kind of a control freak when it comes to this stuff, and I have all my ideas are. I mean, I've got a lot of stuff written down, but a lot of it's in my head as well. And part of for me, like what allows me to work really efficiently is that I don't necessarily need to communicate my ideas to a team or to other people. It's just within myself, so I can have a simpler, more streamlined process. And I feel confident I can actually do all of the things I've laid out. It's just an issue of time. But that's not to completely say I will not take help if somebody is really interested in the games. Like, I want to work on this with you. And if the vibe is right, if there's good, rapport between us, that's super important to me. So it's just challenging though, because you can't just, force somebody to work for you, and I'm not going to hire anybody right now.
Yeah. Well, that transitions us nicely into some of the business parts of it. So, do you have a company? Is your studio like an actual government recognized company?
Yes, Axon Genesis is an LLC,
Okay.
and I've been doing a lot of business planning and market research into the viability for Sidetrack. That includes, I've got a pending trademark on the name itself because I wanted to make sure I secure that before releasing anything. And uh, it is just essentially still a sole proprietorship at this point, but I do envision with success working with more people. I would love to get together a core team of people to do bigger projects, because I know this is probably beyond the limit of what I can do, like at the edge of the limit of what I can do myself without having more time. So I know the cooler stuff is definitely done when you get people who are really good. Like I would love for somebody who's like a great ZBrush modeler, a great illustrator who could just draw like cool avatars and stuff like that.
Nice. So, how do you plan on marketing the game? I know you spoke. You said you had done some research into that.
Yeah, that is a conundrum. I feel like for lots of people, and I've just been absorbing as much information as I can. I've been watching lots of talks on YouTube about the indie gaming industry, and it's kind of disheartening to hear like how much people are struggling. And I certainly did not know this getting into it. All the work I've done before, most of the work I've done before, has been for other companies, and so I haven't been on the aspect of marketing and PR. But I did just talk to this past week a marketing and PR firm that specializes in indie gaming. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing their name correctly. It's Haleo PR in Madrid. So we haven't agreed on any sort of contract or agreement yet, but it's awesome to know that there are companies out there that specialize in the industry for indie gamers, particularly because I know there's just a lot of aspects to that I would really rather not do, because I have my work cut out for me doing the development work and the design. I'd rather focus on that and have someone else who can write great press releases and get the reach out. But then it also then comes back onto me. So to show what I'm doing, and so like doing this podcast is one form of PR, I guess you could say, and also doing social media. But I'm also inspired by what other people are doing, like sharing, either live streaming their development or doing how-to videos, showing behind the scenes. So I'm planning on doing more of that. It's just a matter of figuring out, okay, what's the right strategy I'm going to get the most mileage for, because I don't want to spend all my time trying to manage a community or trying to promote stuff. I'd rather focus on one thing I think is going to be interesting and draw a community on its own.
And have you considered at all streaming your development while you're developing, streaming that, like, say, to Twitch and stuff? Because I know that's something that some studios do as kind of a PR thing. And believe it or not, there's people that enjoy watching that.
Yeah, it surprises me, in fact, that there are people who just stream their development and people watch that. I have considered it. I think I just need to get over my self-consciousness in doing it, because I'm used to just being lost in my own thoughts. And so I think maybe I just need to try it out for a while and see how it goes and see what sort of feedback I get. It's just a matter of taking the plunge and doing it. And I feel that the time is now to do that, I've been sitting on this project for a long time, not showing really anybody outside of my inner circle. So like even coming onto your guys' channel and talking about this, is a big step for me to like tell the world about this game I'm making now, making it real. Like, okay, I'm gonna actually follow through and make this.
Yeah.
Well, I think that
no going back now.
Yeah.
I think that you would be surprised at how many people are interested in the world of game development. As I always say, it's an art. It really is an art form, just like painting or drawing or making movies. It's all an art, and people are interested in it. And that's part of the reason why we do this podcast is we want to get behind the scenes at actual game development and how that works with especially the smaller indie game studios.
Absolutely. And in fact, what I'd like to speak into that for a moment is, particularly for me, what excites me about game development is it's the closest thing from my point of view to being able to be like a wizard in this world, where you get to create all this crazy stuff, these experiences, these other places that people can go and tell stories and really create a sense of magic for other people as well. So uh, that's also, kind of my dream, is that, and that's why I'm doing everything, or at least attempting to do everything, producing music, doing the artwork, doing the programming, because I feel like the more skills I learn, the more I can kind of be like this wizard and like make cool stuff.
I love that take on it for sure.
Yeah.
So
So why don't we? Oh, go ahead.
no,
Go ahead.
you go ahead, Spencer. I'll ask mine after you.
Sweet. I got to cut in. So let's talk about your ideas for wanting to get some funding on Kickstarter. What's going on with all that?
Right. So yeah, another learning lesson in all of this process is, originally I thought I would do the Kickstarter this year, and I started getting ready for it, feeling a bit of stress, and okay, there's so much to do, and getting all these things ready. And then the more I investigated, the more I realized this is a really bad idea to do it. And considering the failures in Kickstarter, there's a enormous rate of failure. I think I forget the exact statistic now, but indie games particularly have a high failure rate. So in order to succeed in Kickstarter, you really need to bring your own audience to it. You need to have people ready, and that means building up community and having a newsletter, or at least the place you go to where you connect with people who already know about your game, who are ready to buy it, essentially. So I've decided that it would be much better to do the Kickstarter later to fund the final push of the project. So I'm going to continue self-funding until partway through next year, and the dates may change, but right now I'm looking at March, and I'm planning on working with a PR firm to help me organize it, strategize, and have the best possible chance of succeeding. As they say, if you don't raise 20% of your funds in the first 48 hours, you're 99% guaranteed to fail. So that means you need to have a lot of people ready just to click the button and go for it. So I really want to have that final push to make the product as best as it can be.
I think it's a really smart way to go about it.
And plus, also, the other advantage of waiting is I'll be able to show a more finished product. Whereas if I were to do a Kickstarter next month, I'm still showing a game that's still kind of an alpha and has a lot of holes in it. And yeah, I could make it look prettier and kind of hide the things that aren't working, but I'll feel a lot more confident and have more stuff to show when I'm further along. And I think people will get more excited about that, like, oh, this is going to happen, and they don't have to wait so long. So once they back the project, it'll be a few months before they can play.
Which is better than the years or so.
You kind of broke up there, Spencer. What was that again?
Oh, it's kind of breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, we may have lost him there for a second.
Yeah,
I think there we go. He's back.
Oh, you're back. Okay.
I was out for a bit. It looked like I was fine on my end, but you guys are frozen. I'm like, no, that doesn't seem right. They didn't both just freeze at the same time.
I didn't quite catch what you said, Spencer.
So I was just asking if you were going to worry about, like, leave most of the Kickstarter stuff to the PR company, or if you were looking into things on your end to, like, Thunderclap or other things like that just get everyone to reply at the same time. I'm
figuring all that out. So,
okay. All right.
I have my own ideas, but granted, I haven't run a successful Kickstarter yet, and so when I approach that, I really want to get people, whether it's the PR firm, get someone who knows the ins and outs of it, who can help me plan it, and that may require, and I'm expecting it's going to require putting some money up front, paying it forward to make sure, I'm being as slim as I can with my budget during this time, but I know it takes money to do successful PR and marketing, and so I'm definitely planning on. I've made that mistake before of not pushing hard enough on that end, and then now that I know how difficult it is to succeed in the indie gaming world, that's a absolute priority.
So is this your first game that you've made?
It's the first game that's going to be released in Steam. I've done like over a dozen apps and stuff for iOS, but I don't know if you'd consider them games. They're more like interactive experiences. So yeah, I would say this is my first actual game that you call a video game.
So, say that this game's a success. Do you plan to make more games, or do you plan to just maybe continue supporting this one? What are your plans for the future? Have you thought that far ahead?
I have, and there's a few possibilities. I think first off, I would love to continue building upon the Sidetrack world and come out with a Sidetrack 2 or a sequel to it that's even bigger and better and addresses more of what the community feedback says. But if Sidetrack comes out and it's let's say mediocre or does poorly, but I'm able to still continue developing, I might consider different ideas, because I'm not going to continue to go down a path if it's not fruitful. But I'm really planning on it to be, and hoping it will be. I'm hoping people will absolutely love this game and will be like, oh wow, I want to see more, and and it could lead to more stuff. So we'll see.
Nice.
So is this going to be only a Steam game, or do you plan to move it to other platforms?
That I would also put in the same category. Is I absolutely would love to get this like out on Xbox, PlayStation, or whatever, go through other publishing routes, but it's not going to be my focus initially. And Steam is appears to me to be the best entry point right now for someone new in the industry. And so if I can make a success on Steam, that would be another thing I would like to get going on right away, is talking about porting it to other platforms and seeing how viable that is. And I think it should be. From the research I've done, at least getting it out on some consoles should be possible.
Yeah, for me personally, like I think this kind of game I prefer playing with a controller. So I think I think it could really translate well to consoles.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a beautiful thing about Unity as well, is that it has the built-in support for all the different platforms. Now, granted, it's not going to just be like, press a button and it's done. There's a lot of considerations, and I'm guessing it'll take several months and hoops to jump through to get it right. And I may need at that point to get someone who specializes in it, who knows that process, taking a Unity game or a Steam game and making it into an Xbox game, for example. But I'll cross that bridge when I get there. Right now, it's just earmarked as like, okay, this is a great idea. I would love to do if the interest is there.
All right.
So how would you describe this game to someone that's never heard of it?
I always go back to my tagline, which is just saying it's a futuristic anti-gravity racing game where you race against time to collect items and you explore alien worlds and other planets. And yeah, I think that's probably as simple as explanation as I can get with it. And of course, people want to know more. I can tell them like, oh yeah, there's psytrance music in it, and trippy visuals, and so a lot of glowy neon stuff, and meant to be both futuristic but also trippy. So.
And so this is a racing game. So is it a race against time? Because it's mainly a single player, like you said right now. So is this a race against the timer, or are you racing against this monster, the darkness? How does that aspect work?
Yeah, so you are racing against time to collect the items. So each level, there's basically the way it works is you need to collect all of the shapes, the geometric shapes which are strewn about the level, and you need to go through all the different paths to find where they are, and do that before time runs out. It gets really complicated on some of the complex levels because there's just so many ways to go. So you have to remember where you've been, where you haven't gone. You might need navigators to show you like what paths you've been down, or give you clues where items are. And then there's choices to be made too, because there's the monster there that's holding these rewards, and you can gain new abilities by defeating it. But if you spend your time trying to kill the monster, you might actually fail the mission. So I think I'm thinking a lot of this is being done in passes, where each level will be played multiple times by the player. Because the other aspect to it too is that there's going to be these hidden keyed passages that you can't get into because it requires a certain key. And so throughout the game, there's a set of 4 different keys you can get, which unlock different passages that are like color coded to those keys. So you may in level 5 get this key that unlocks doors in level 1 that you weren't able to go into before. So I want that experience for the player when they go back to play. They're continually finding new things, new challenges. And I don't have it built into the current version yet, but it is on the scope to build in some additional time challenges. So there may be a loop track where you go into a special little like cubby hole, whatever, where then the beings of that world present you with a challenge. Like, if you can complete this lap with 3 times within this time, we'll give you this special reward. And it's just kind of an aside you take, and then when you finish it, whether you succeed or not, you come back to the regular game and you still have your time left to finish the map. So there's going to be like little side missions and stuff built into it.
So how are you going?
You talked a little bit about some.
Oh, he's breaking up again there a little bit. There we go.
Didn't quite catch that.
He's back. He's not back. All right. So how are you going to keep players from having it feel like it's repetitive? I'm a short attention span guy. Like I'm not a big. I don't really go back and play levels. I play a game through once, done. So how do you keep that new feeling when they're going back to, like, say, some levels that they've already done, to unlock different things?
Right. That's a great question, and something I definitely have thought a lot about. And I still have to do some exploration on that front. But one of the things I really want to be able to accomplish with this is that the base premise is that there's this dark energy that's kind of taking over the universe. So when you go back, I want the player to be able to experience the world flipped. Like, it's the same world, the same paths, but you are essentially experiencing a different version of that world or different time of it. So, and you have the opportunity to set things back. So I'm planning additional soundtrack to be added to it as well for that experience. So when you go back and play the level for the second time, once you've already completed it, you may have a different experience of that level, but it'll be the same level, but you'll have access to new things. There'll be new things to discover. So, but that's still, on paper. It's not built into the game yet. So I have my work cut out for me to get all that stuff implemented.
Yeah. So you were talking about, like the special levels, within the level that, the ancient beings may give you a task to do and you'll get a reward for it. So are these things like ship upgrades, weapon upgrades on your ship? How does that work?
Great question. So there's a bunch of different aspects of this game. First off, the points you collect, which I call nano, you can use the nano to synthesize upgrades for your ship, which include booster upgrades. And the boosters are not just about making your vehicle go faster. It's also about timing. It's about traction control, because when you get higher speeds, the ship goes crazy. So you get traction control to keep it on the tracks. And then there's the navigation upgrades, which are basically the heads-up display add-ons. So you get like new panels and different features, targeting system, etc. But then there's a whole set of, there's force fields, and the force fields help your ship collect more nano. So basically it creates a particle collection sphere, and it also helps from enemy attacks, reduce enemy attacks. And then there's the set of abilities that you get. There's 12 abilities that can be collected, one on each level, and those abilities range from weapons to special powers, like being able to control time. There's a slow-mo one where you can make time go slower. There's one you can teleport from one part of the map to another. So actually, these abilities are working now in the latest version of the build, but there's still more work to be done on that and how they're unveiled and such. So so it's a mixture of a bunch of different upgrades and different pathways to get them.
Okay, all right, nice. That's one of the things that I love, especially about single player games is being able to unlock new things, upgrades. Like that's what keeps me coming back. That's
Yes.
a addicting part to me, is that constant, working towards something bigger, better. Uh, so
Right.
I definitely like that aspect of it.
And part of the logic, at least, and strategy in my mind of how this is going to work and why players will want to go back and play earlier levels is because when you get a treasure key, for example, it'll give you access to treasure rooms where you can score really big, massive points in order to get the higher level upgrades. And so I'm using, and this may change, but right now I'm using a Fibonacci series in the points of, escalating the points so that it requires to synthesize certain upgrades. So the higher up ones, it requires so much nano that you really need special abilities in order to collect that much.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm hoping is there's going to be this sort of dynamic thing where you want all these extra things, but in order to get them, you need to go back and do stuff that that allows you to collect more.
Mm-hmm. So that brings me into how are you planning on charging for the game? Is it going to be like a one price done, or is it going to be free to play and you can buy upgrades, or is it going to be a one price and then you can within the game buy upgrades and stuff, or you can just play and unlock them yourself? How are you
Right.
going to do that?
I feel really strongly about it being a fixed price,
Mm-hmm.
and once you own the game, there's nothing else you need to buy. And I've been actually hesitant and careful not to use the word buy in my verbiage in the game, which is I say synthesize upgrades, because I don't want people to think that there's anything they're going to need to actually spend money on. Everything is achievable in the game purely by playing the game. So not that it couldn't work, but I just didn't design this game for it to be like an in-app purchase type deal.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, and I think you're correct. I think that community receives that better. There's
Yeah,
kind of a backlash within that in-game purchases. So
right.
I think that's a
Yeah.
smart way to take it. So
Yeah.
what's the? Oh, we can hear Spencer.
I've been here, just
We just can't see you.
we just had to have more issues on our end.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
we're having some technical difficulties with this episode, and we apologize. So
So it
what
makes
is
it interesting, right?
right? So I was just kind of taking it there, Spencer. Did you have any additional questions with what we've been talking about? I just assumed you were not there.
Um, oh, oh, okay, I see. Yeah, you actually asked a couple that I was thinking of. My only one is do you have a favorite upgrade for the ships? Like, is it one that you're like, oh, this is the coolest one?
Hmm. That's a great question. I just added these new abilities, and they've been just on paper for a while, but now they're actually working, and I think they're really fun. There's rocket launchers and lightning strike. Uh, so the lightning strike basically sends out a blast from your ships like an EMP blast, and anything within range gets zapped. And if it's nano, that gets collected. If it's enemy, it gets damaged, and the smaller enemy items will get blasted away just by one zap. Um, so that's been pretty fun, and particularly since I was resistant to having like explosions and stuff in the game. But now that I've added it, it actually makes it a lot more fun. So I think
Explosions are always fun.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
uh,
what is your goal for this game?
Goal in what sense?
What's your end goal for this game? What is it that you see once it's complete? What is your vision?
Well, I mean, my vision really is to make a really cool, compelling game. It's not going to be the most. It's not going to be the best game ever because I'm just one guy and it's a pretty big scope. But I'm hoping that my objective is to make it really cool, super interesting. It may not have the longest game play time, but I'm hoping that it'll be very rewarding for players just based on the visuals, the rewards they can get, the things they can do within it, and the possibility of expanding upon it later. So if I would see success of this game as being able to uh, recoup my investment on it over time, but minimally being able to continue have enough sales to continue funding new development, whatever that looks like. And I I look forward to there being a community around the game as well that I can work with more and take their feedback and do even things I never imagined. So.
What is
Yeah.
your tentative release date?
I'm looking at July next year right now,
Okay.
but I'm not putting that. I'm not engraving that yet. Or I'm saying it now, but with a little asterisk by it. So, because there really is a lot of work to do, but I will feel more confident about that in a few months once I've seen, gotten more progress done in terms of level design and such. But summer 2019 is my target release date right now, and to have it in early access even before then.
I like it.
All right.
So, Spencer, do you have any questions before we hit a couple of rapid fire questions, and then go ahead and end the podcast?
Uh, I don't have any questions that would be like short questions. I have a couple that I kind of wondered if I wanted to ask, but they'll take too long. So let's just jump ahead of that.
All right.
All right.
So we're gonna do a few rapid fire questions for you, and then we'll go ahead and end it. So what's the funnest part of the game right now to you?
Um, just flying the ship around, I think, is the most fun thing. Flying around curved tracks and being able to go down these different passages and tunnels. That to me is just it's the basic mechanic of it, but I find that to be really fun.
Like, now, what's the most
Yeah.
frustrating part?
Absolutely the physics. The physics are such a beast to work with, and I'm not saying anything bad about Unity or physics engine. It's just very challenging. Like that development aspect of it took probably the longest time to get working, and there's still issues with it. It's probably the most monstrous part of the coding to it. Um, but I'm really excited about it because I feel like I've really accomplished a lot, and so I know that all the issues that are remaining are things I can dial in and I can fix and I can address. So I'm excited about that. But it has been probably the most frustrating part of the whole process.
So, what's your funniest story from development? Bugs or something that happened?
Hmm, that's a good one. Shoot, I'm not. Nothing's coming to mind right now. A funny thing. Actually, this whole idea with the monster, the sphere monster, it was kind of an accident, and that was really funny. I was actually cracking myself up over it uh, because I basically was just messing around one day, and I had this sphere sitting in the world, and it was something you touched, and it was like I was experimenting with different enemies, and I thought, well, what if I just put a follow script on this and have it follow the player? And suddenly it was just like attacking me left and right, and it was kind of comical because this thing is just relentless when it's following just the player. You can't get away from it. So it's a little bit more tame now. It's not.
Not quite as aggressive.
If you attack it, it gets really aggressive. But
So, what is one piece of advice that you would give to a up and coming developer or somebody who's interested in developing their own game?
I would highly recommend just to learn as much as you possibly can, and not just about game development, but about personal development. Learn how to be efficient, how to live a balanced life, how to uh, just excel in everything. Because I think that the only way a person can really devote themselves 100% to something is when their life is in harmony. If their relationships are in good standing, if their bank account is in good standing, you can do a lot when you just have your work to focus on. But if you have all these other distractions and things, those kind of need to be resolved, I think, first. And so I'm a big fan of audiobooks, and I've trained myself to listen to them at like double speed because
Me too.
I want to, yeah,
I love audiobooks. Yeah, I will listen to the audiobooks and podcasts about whatever interest it is, whatever I'm trying to
yes,
develop at the time. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that. I'll have them on constantly throughout the day when I'm working on things. So, yeah,
yeah.
I completely agree with that.
And in one book, I would just plug real quick that's been very helpful for me is it's called Mindset by Carol Dweck, I believe. And the whole premise of it is you basically can have one of two learning mindsets, either a learning or a fixed mindset. And when you're in a fixed mindset, you take everything personally, like, oh, I'm bad at math or whatever, and you don't grow because you're afraid of taking the steps necessary to grow. Whereas when you shift into a learning mindset, everything is just opportunity to learn, get better. And I even look at it like this game. It's like nothing that says this game is guaranteed to succeed. Actually, the cards are stacked against me, but I'm looking at all as a learning opportunity, and I highly recommend everybody else do that. Find what just resonates with them, that they get excited about and passionate about, and pursue it and make it happen.
I think that's a fantastic piece of advice. I completely agree with that. All right, well,
Yeah.
we are coming on here to the end. We apologize for the technical difficulty. Yeah, I can't talk now. Technical difficulties for this episode. I think I want to have you on again if you're
Okay,
interested. Maybe
sure.
when you get to the crowd funding part, and we can get
That'd
to
be
some
wonderful.
questions. That I had some questions I had for you, and I know Spencer did, that we weren't able to get to due to some of the problems that we had for this. But I think we definitely want to have you on again. And thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
And if you're interested in checking out the game, go ahead and check out the links in the description. We have the link to his website, and we also have the link to the game, and you can check it out
Yeah.
yourself there.
All right, awesome. Thank you guys.
All right.
All right.